Ever wish your smartwatch could do a little more than just nag you to stand up or tell you how many steps you've taken? Like, what if it could actually help unlock some secrets to better diabetes management?
Now, that would be something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got a couple of really fascinating articles from Diabetic, and they're all about, you guessed it, diabetes and technology.
It's amazing to see how much potential there is in personal data to, lead to these kinds of breakthroughs.
And the author of these articles, let me tell you, they're like a walking, talking data source. I mean, they track everything, CGM data, insulin pump info, you name it, all in an effort to understand their own diabetes better.
I love that. Taking ownership of your health data like that, it's inspiring. They even dove into their smartwatch data, looking specifically at things like total daily dose of insulin, TDD.
Like TDD?
Yeah. And time in range, TIR, sleep patterns. They were really trying to see how these things all connected to their activity levels.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's break that down a bit for our listeners, just in case. CGM stands for Continuous Glucose Monitor. TDD is basically the total amount of insulin a person takes in a day.
Right.
And TIR, that refers to the amount of time their blood sugar stays within that healthy range.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, so back to the smartwatch data. What were they really trying to find?
So one of the big things they were curious about was step patterns. I mean, we've all heard that we should be aiming for that magical 10,000 steps a day, right? But what if it's not just about how many steps you take, but when you take them?
So it's not just about hitting that magic number, it's more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It's about the timing of that activity. And what the author found was super interesting. They noticed that spreading out activity throughout the day, instead of just doing one big workout, it actually seemed to have a much more significant impact on both their blood sugar levels and their insulin needs.
Wow. So instead of trying to cram in a whole workout, it's better to, like, sprinkle it throughout the day.
Right, like little snacks, but for activity. The author actually used the phrase activity snacking, which I love.
Activity snacking. I love that.
Yeah, just little bursts of movement here and there.
So much more doable than trying to block out, like, a whole hour
Yeah.
in an already jam-packed day.
Right, and potentially, way more beneficial, at least according to this initial research. The author consistently saw more stable blood sugar on days when they embraced this whole activity snacking approach, almost like their body just responded better to those mini workouts sprinkled throughout the day.
That's wild. So I have to ask then, if those mini workouts are like, healthy snacks for our blood sugar, what about actual sleep?
Hmm.
Did their data show anything about how sleep quality played into all of this?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And actually, speaking of things that can really influence our blood sugar throughout the day and night, when it came to sleep, the author was really curious about the connection between their sleep patterns and their total daily dose of insulin, their TDD.
It makes sense. If you're up all night, your body might need different amounts of insulin, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they actually found a statistically significant correlation between the two. On nights when the author got less sleep, their TDD tended to be higher.
So less sleep equals more insulin needed.
Yeah.
Interesting. Does that mean those late night Netflix binges are messing with our blood sugar more than we think?
It's definitely possible, but we have to remember correlation doesn't always equal causation, right? There could be other factors at play here. Maybe those late night Netflix binges also involve a lot of like mindless snacking, which could also be impacting those insulin needs. It's all about looking at the whole picture.
Okay, that's a really good point. But it does make you wonder, though, like, what if we could pinpoint exactly how sleep quality influences our blood sugar? Could we eventually have devices that could adjust our insulin doses for us?
Oh, wow.
Imagine that, like, your smartwatch is talking to your insulin pump, automatically tweaking your basal rates based on how well you slept the night before. Talk about personalized medicine.
Oh, that would be incredible, wouldn't it? And it just really highlights how much potential there is in all of this, this personalized data analysis. But we can't get ahead of ourselves because, there's still so much we just don't know. The author found this link between their sleep and their TDD, but it wasn't always consistent. There were some nights where they'd get a great night's sleep and still see these weird variations in their insulin needs.
Oh, so frustrating, isn't it? It's like our bodies love to keep us guessing.
Mm.
But speaking of things that can make our blood sugar do some pretty unexpected things, what about food? Didn't the author mention something about not tracking their food intake for this initial analysis?
They did, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind here. We're talking about all these potential connections between activity levels, sleep, and insulin needs. But without actually factoring in the food piece of the puzzle, it's really hard to say for sure how big of an impact each of these factors is truly having.
So food is kind of like the wild card in all of this.
Exactly. It could be that those inconsistent blood sugar days were actually due to, a rogue slice of cake, and not necessarily a bad night's sleep or a missed activity snack.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like trying to solve a mystery, but you're missing a key piece of evidence.
Exactly. And, it's something that the author acknowledges. They're really hoping to explore that food factor in more depth in their future research.
Hmm.
Imagine if we could combine the data from our CGMs, our insulin pumps, our smartwatches, and our food journals.
Oh man, talk about a data goldmine.
Then we'd finally be able to see the whole picture, how our activity levels, our sleep patterns, and what we eat all kind of work together or against each other sometimes to influence our blood sugar.
Exactly. It would be huge for diabetes management. It really would.
I mean, this is all so incredibly fascinating, but I have to admit, I am starting to feel a little overwhelmed by all this data. Where do we even begin to make sense of it all?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. And that's what we're going to be diving into in the final part of our deep dive. So we've talked about activity snacking, sleep patterns, those mysterious missing food logs. It's a lot. What's the big takeaway here? What does it all really mean?
It's really easy to get so caught up in the numbers, right? The graphs, the quest for that, that perfect blood sugar control. But I think the real power of all of this research, the data that the author collected, is that it helps us better understand our own bodies and how they respond to, just the rhythms of our everyday lives.
So instead of, stressing about getting those 10,000 steps or beating ourselves up over a night of bad sleep, maybe it's more about noticing those individual patterns, right? The nuances, the quirks that make our own diabetes journeys unique.
Exactly. It's about moving away from, those one-size-fits-all approaches and embracing the fact that what works for one person may not work for another. And that's where this personalized data can be so valuable.
Totally. It's like having a secret decoder ring for your own body. But let's be real for a sec. Not everyone is walking around with like a spreadsheet of their biometrics,
Right.
So how do we take all this really cool research and make it like actually actionable for the average person living with diabetes?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
honestly, I think it's going to require, a really big collaborative effort. We need researchers, we need tech developers, healthcare providers, and most importantly, we need people with diabetes. We need to be working together to create these user-friendly tools and technologies that can actually help us collect, analyze, and interpret our own data in a way that actually makes sense.
Imagine if your smartwatch could not only track your sleep and activity, but could then give you these personalized insights and recommendations based on your own personal patterns and trends. Like, hey, based on your data, you always seem to see a blood sugar spike after you have that brand of protein bar. Maybe try swapping it out with some Greek yogurt next time.
Oh, see, now that's a future I can get behind. And honestly, it's not even that far-fetched. The technology is already out there. It's just a matter of harnessing it in a way that empowers people with diabetes to take control of their own health.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It's like we finally have all the pieces of the puzzle. And with a little help from, some cool tech, we can finally put it all together.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day we'll all look back on this as the moment when our smartwatches became, our partners in health, guiding us towards better blood sugar control one step at a time.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. What if the key to better diabetes management has been right there on our wrist all along, just waiting to be discovered?